signs and hand gestures.
I gotcha. I don't even think I know gang signs.
Yeah.
I'd probably throw one accidentally.
Yeah. Well,
and not have any idea.
I have always wondered this, and this is not necessarily a religious topic or not, but sign language. How often does that get misinterpreted as gang signs, and how many disputes go in from there?
I have a friend who would know the answer to that question, I bet.
Okay. So, folks, we appreciate you joining us today. We are in a different setting with a different co-host today. So we have Anna Kitko back. So we appreciate you inviting us into your house.
Of course, welcome.
And it would not be a Blessing and Cursing podcast if we didn't have somebody's phone going on there. We are in your incredible library. Not to toot your own horn or anything, but this is amazing to me. I spent the past, I think, 20 minutes just reading the titles of these books, and I definitely see, where you have all your research material. So that's awesome. And of course, Philip's behind camera today, or to the side behind camera.
I think you can see me.
Yeah. Not on my.
I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm in the bottom right hand.
We're all just playing games here, just having a conversation, talking about God. And so today we're going to do a little bit different than the last time you were on. Last time it was very. We had just kind of. It really was. It was like, hey, we've met this woman. She's an apologist. She's working with UT. She does these community nights. Let's kind of just shotgun all these questions. But today we want to know a little bit more about who you are, kind of what makes you tick, and your walk with God so far. So tell us, how did Anna Kitko become the friendly neighborhood apologist?
Yes,
Is that it?
That's what you normally say. That's my Spider-Man reference.
Yeah.
I only read 2 comics growing up, and it was Spider-Man and
Thor?
No.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Are you a Thor fan?
Thor is my favorite.
All right, so no, it's super nerdy. Tomb Raider.
Okay.
So I was a Lara Croft fan for sure. So that's how I became an apologist, is aspiring to be Lara Croft. I'm just kidding. So the friendly neighborhood apologist thing comes from that, because it's just I didn't like how the apologists that I encountered early on in my career were kind of in your face a lot, and the dialogues were more combative, and it was like the person in front of me is my enemy, kind of.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't good. I didn't like it. And so anyway, but that's beside the point. How did I get started? I was going to school for medicine. I come from a family of very strong Christians, lots of missionaries. Took that for granted. Didn't think anything of it. Just assumed that was just the normal breakdown of a Christian household, and that's what everybody got. That's not true. My father taught church history and the differences between denominations, and then I have a step-grandfather who was the head of a philosophy and religion department at a college. So I mean, I was coming from basically, the richness of all of these people who were 10 times smarter than I could ever imagine being, and I just took it for granted. But I took it for granted to college, where I was going to be a surgeon. I wanted to do medicine, and I was basically introduced in high school to a series of cult members who were friends of mine, in particular Jehovah's Witnesses.
I was about to say what cult.
Yeah, in particular the Jehovah's Witnesses. So I had Mormon friends and Jehovah's Witness friends, and we were in the process. My best friend and I were in the process of starting the first Bible study that was like high school. It was a public high school, but it was the first Bible study where we'd get teachers together to study. So it would come together as Christians, and we weren't allowed to. It wasn't sanctioned by the school. We didn't care, so we felt like the fire. You're like, absolutely. We're like, that's okay. We're gonna meet without your permission because we're Christians and you can't tell us what to do. And so we had that, and that kind of blossomed into this deep dive into theology and things that I didn't know about, things that I had personally taken for granted about my own faith, like articulating the Trinity. That being a really big moment for me, that I realized I was incapable. I was completely incompetent at trying to say to somebody across the table for me what the Trinity is without just completely flubbing it or teaching heresy accidentally. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I really don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm a huge academic person. I've always been that way. I love to read. I took my father's seminary books from his library, spread them out we had a breakfast bar in our house, and it was just book after book after book after book. And I stopped watching TV. I was like in the Word. I was taking a Yale class on Greek and Hebrew because I don't know Greek and Hebrew. And the person in front of me claims they do. They didn't. I didn't know this at the time, but I took them seriously. And it just got worse and worse and worse in the best possible way, in that they kept sending elders to my house. And then the elders would get upset with me because we were meeting like 3 times a week. the elders would get upset at me and be like, well, we need to bring in somebody else higher up to deal with these questions because we don't know.
Elders and from the witnesses?
And from the witnesses,
okay.
yeah. And same thing with the Mormons. The Mormons got scared off a lot faster than the witnesses. The witnesses had a little bit more.
The
you know what I
witnesses
mean?
do
They
have a
some,
drive.
They have some gumption.
Yeah.
They wanna have those hard conversations. So yeah, they kept sending people to my house, and sure enough, we got to a point where there was some type of regional director that came and talked to me for just one session after I'd worked with all these elders. And we finished the conversation. It went well. At least I thought it did. He took his crew back. They blackmarked the house, told my friends that I was not human and I was a demon. And then they weren't allowed to converse with me anymore. And so that, of course, erupted into this whole big thing, because of course that's the worst possible thing you could say to a kid that goes to school. We've been friends, like they know I'm not a demon.
Yeah.
So then that erupted to more stuff, and I'm like, yes, Holy Spirit, do this, you know. But through this whole process, I realized, and this was a huge deal, by the time I got to college, I couldn't find anybody else doing this on a regular basis on behalf of these Jehovah's Witnesses. And through this process, I had met a bunch of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who had been disfellowshipped over doing exactly the same thing. I hadn't been baptized, so they couldn't disfellowship me because I really wasn't a part of the congregation. But these guys had, and they were trying to get their loved ones out. And so there was this whole thing, and I was like, there's nobody to help these people, and I'm doing this, 24, I'm just consumed, right? How can you not be? You're helping people.
Yeah.
And it's live, and the changes are right there, and they're people you love. And I was like, I have to do something about this. And the Lord really just drove me to my knees one day. I was in tears about how much of an idolater I was, and how much I had taken, like my life was in my hands, and it really, I was like, yes, Lord, of course I love you, but like it's my life, that kind of thing. And man, he just, the repentance on the level that I had to repent was significant. And that was the day I wrote a covenant in my little book that I had been studying theology and writing notes down in. I wrote a covenant, and I was, even at that point, I was not courageous enough to really like sign it yet. Like I wrote it, but like I knew that if I was going to commit, that I was going to commit. So I wasn't quite ready to do that. And so I thought, well, here's what I'll do. I'll sign in pencil for now. And that's, pencil's not permanent like that. You can't have a contract with a pencil.
Yeah, that's not legally binding.
Yes, how silly of this. But the point is, the Lord, it has a serious sense of humor, because what I had picked up was a silver gel pen, not a pencil. And so I signed this covenant, and it's in pen, and I'm like, and I mean, it was just that, and the Lord laughed, and I could tell he was laughing at me in the best possible way. And I was like, all right, Lord, I guess we're doing this. And I dropped my pre-med scholarship, and I picked up a second degree in religion, because I was a philosophy major. Picked up a second degree in religion, and I said, I guess what we're going to try to do is, you've been telling me to do this, whatever this is, because apologetics is not a thing that you could study at the time.
Right.
I mean, even my own parents, who were beautiful Christians, knew about apologetics, but I said I want to be an apologist, and they're like, what? Like that, what does that mean? Like, how does that work? How are you going to eat?
Yeah.
You know, who needs to hire an apologist? We're going to have to start a whole ministry, the whole 9 yards. And I was like, yep, this is what's going to happen, I guess. And the Lord just kind of took it and ran with it. I got finished 2 degrees in less than 3 years, which was a huge...
Awesome.
And I had a Cambridge degree already to back it up for international stuff, which would come in later. Went to seminary, focused as much everything that I could possibly get that would help me be the best apologist that I could think of, because again, you're graduating with, you know, either a divinity degree or a master's of some specialty. I focused in Greek because Hebrew is scary, and I didn't want to lose my scholarship. I love Hebrew. I think it's a blast, but I don't want anybody, like my seminary was very, very serious. You couldn't even take a Bible into exams. It was literally, you walked in on your own, and they're like, here's your manuscript. You either can do this or you can't.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so intimidated by that. You had to specialize. So I picked Greek, which ended up working out, because most cults, they change the Greek more than they change the Hebrew. Not always, but it's the New Testament that they're trying to attack primarily.
Sure.
Because it's always the person of Jesus.
Yeah.
That, and they're also intimidated by Hebrew. I don't know if you've noticed.
Well, there's not a lot of vowels in Hebrew, from my understanding, that they use, so it's kind of a lot of fill in the gaps.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that and the amount of people that can still read Hebrew too. It's hard to convince people. You know, at least with Koine Greek, you have enough removed that even if you have a modern Greek speaker, they can still get tripped up a little bit. So at least that's a theory, a working theory. Anyway, the Lord took me through seminary. Still wasn't sure. I was just like, I guess He's gonna have me teach, or at the very least, you know, I didn't think I was gonna get married. I didn't think I was gonna have children. I thought I was just gonna be like functionally a nun. He surprised me with my husband and my babies, but
a Protestant nun.
Yeah, a Protestant nun. But just focusing on ministry 24/7, you know, whatever it was, because that's what was all consuming.
Yeah.
And he just surprised me. I was teaching apologetics just in general. I was always offering. I was an elementary school teacher for a Church of God, and I was teaching apologetics all the way through the high school and everything. And I just figured I would just be like that house mom.
How do you go from? I mean, so when you were teaching in elementary school, what was the subject specifically? Were you teaching apologetics to these kids, or was it just kind of a general?
Yes. So I actually was hired as the high school theology teacher.
Okay.
Because they needed somebody to come in and sit, because I guess their theology teacher needed to leave, and the kids weren't getting any apologetics. They were functionally just doing Our Daily Bread series. Like, no, you guys need way more. And so we turned it into apologetics class, and we just opened up to ask me anything about God, and then they, you know, it's crickets.
Sure.
And so I'd start behaving like an atheist in front of them and start like nitpicking. I'd call them out, and it was great. It was very, very fun. Well, they needed a third grade teacher. A bunch of things happened. I didn't have any experience with little kids, but I was their sub, and they knew me, and so I took over. And as the elementary school teacher, we started. It was just as a experiment, because the kids also had questions, and elementary school questions are so fun because you can say things like they're so satisfied. It's like they just were with God. I mean, honestly, it's not like they're not as far removed as the high school kids, right? Right. But you can say things like when they ask about theology, you can be like, "Well, this is what the Lord says," and they're like, "Oh, okay," you know, like. That's it. Are we good? Okay.
You find that the younger kids are more ready to ask questions and not be so reserved?
Absolutely.
Honest in their questions.
Yes, especially if you have an icebreaker. So I would try to go through, there's some Mama Bear apologetics stuff out there for moms to train. And so I'd always have an icebreaker question that I would ask, and then we talk about it. And they're adorable.
Yeah.
So that's how that worked. And it was on Fridays. We joined together the 5th graders, the 4th graders, kind of play off of each other. It was great. But through that, I just figured the Lord was just going to have me teach apologetics as a Bible study or as a community group or whatever. And then one day, I got recruited by Russia Christie, and they're like, "We're a ministry of," and it was like, oh, the Lord was preparing me for a job that didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And I think that I really feel like that was, and it was really beautiful, because I mean, I was sending out to a church if they needed somebody to teach an apologetics class or if they wanted to join. And my now administrative assistant was like, sure, these apologetics teachers aren't like, you know, yahoos from somewhere. They could be anybody.
Yeah.
I gotta make sure they're not heretics. He sent back the email. He goes, "You have no idea. We prayed about you last night." That he was the current chapter director at the University of Tennessee and had to run the chapter, which had become defunct. It was dead. And so, yeah, Russia Christie recruited me. I became their cults and new religion specialist, and know me as that.
Here you've been. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I was thinking about the moment when you were talking about that you dropped you know, the church that you and Jonathan just preached at in West Virginia, my mom's new assembly. Lady there, she was she was a banker. Church down here that has been closed for years. I want you.
They don't even have a name.
They don't have a name.
Wow.
They don't have anything.
Okay.
It's just like I want this spiritual church. I want this to be my place of worship, and I want you. And she quit her job, went down there, fixed this little building up on the side of the road, and awesome, isn't it? I mean, it.
Gail said she's lost volume.
Uh-oh.
So they're saying sounds going in and out.
Hush up, Gil.
So while he's working on that, yeah. So it essentially is just a building on the side of the road of the parking lot.
Neat.
There's nothing on the outside that screams this is a house of God. This is anything, and this is a very Church of God area. We have Baptist church around here. That's how their Church of God area was. Yeah. And we went down there, and Jonathan and myself, and we didn't know if Jonathan was going to be able to make it or not, so we kind of just played it by ear, and we both got to deliver a message that night. And it was fantastic. They were singing. It was all over the place, and it was refreshing to get into a group that has no prerequisite mindset of they're here for God, and that's what it is.
It's very liberating.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
So that was really fun, but that is kind of the same idea of that. And I was thinking about this too. We talked this morning with Joe, because Joe is trying to find, and he doesn't care us talking about this. Okay. That's the only name we'll drop. Okay. He's trying to find his specific role within the body, and so he came to Christ very late in life, and he's still very reserved on a lot of that stuff. And he said, "So how did you guys find your roles?" We were like, "Well, we just kind of said we're here." Put us there, and then we very quickly said no, not there.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you didn't have that, because it sounded like you were saying, make this role for me to be here, and I'll be there.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it, except that I went from I thought that I knew God's calling for me pretty clearly, and I've joked before that I thought, because I was going for neurology, I was going to be a brain surgeon, that the Lord was like, brain surgery, you're almost put your finger on it. It's just not that kind of brain surgery. Kind. And I think I worry sometimes.
Close.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Well, I worry sometimes because not everybody struggles with the idolatry stuff that I did, but really when we're listening to the Lord and realizing that He might have something in store for us that we can't even comprehend yet. And really applying that, not just saying that because that's the Christianese thing to say. And because for me it was kind of just like I really felt like I had a very clear direction, and then it just got completely sideswiped, but I couldn't do otherwise. That's the only thing that I have is like this undercurrent of, you could not have stopped me from doing that work without killing me.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been defiant the whole time. It was very clear that that's why I was woken up in the morning, and I still feel that way. And it's wonderful, but it's also it's a little daunting, because we'll talk to students who really want to know, like, vocationally, and that's what they mean, like, what am I doing as a vocation for the Lord? And I have to remind them sometimes that your purpose may not have anything to do with your vocation, which is I'm a millennial. It's a very millennial thing to think that your purpose in life has to do with your job.
Yeah.
And I was very much that way, and it was like, for Him to do that to me too, and then to be like, there is no frame of reference that I have vocationally by which this fits. It was kind of just like, that was the nervous aspect. I knew what I was supposed to do, but I didn't know how that was going to look.
Yeah.
So the long-term planning was hard.
I think, selfishly or not, whether we think about it, I think we want to naturally marry those two things together, because what better way to live your life than to make money for the Lord, with the Lord, and that kind of mindset. And especially as a pastor, I do have that desire of, if I could do this, I've told Philip, if I could do this every day of the week, if I could be paid to basically be the church, to be able to go out and do these things, that would be the best. But of course, God's got different plans for different things there. But I think that's really cool that you were able to make that situation. God provided that situation for you to go into there.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like if there was ever a testimony for He knew us before He formed the earth, with you having philosophy, and especially a father that taught denominational differences, you didn't have an option.
No, and I'm working for a ministry that's interdenominational, which is extremely difficult to navigate.
Sure.
And it's designed to be that way, but that's exactly right. Like, I didn't know that I was getting trained to be able to do that, and now I'm training other people to do that.
Yeah.
Because you have to as an apologist. But even more, if I may introduce a controversial topic, I deal a lot with women in ministry. Because as a director, female director, you've got lots of questions. I could either be, when you walk into my office, I could either be extremely progressive, very liberal. You have no idea. I mean, there's a
Oh,
female leader
That's
teaching
why
theology.
I didn't offer to help.
Yeah, that's right. No, feminism, right? You have to really, what you should have done is make me fight for it to
go.
put the curtain up, so that I really know that I've made
Yeah.
that I've made my
Torn
statement.
muscle.
Yes, exactly.
That's the next wave of feminism.
That's right. Fifth wave is having to fight. No, so I can either be really, really progressive, or I could be completely different, because it's a parachurch ministry, so you can't tell. And so it doesn't matter where I'm interacting as a female director. I've got people already mad at me before I've walked in the door. It happens all the time.
I was going to ask, how much of that do you see?
Oh, all the time.
You look at the walk of Christ. He had people. Everyone was mad at him. You know, at some point, you can't say. A lot of times, his answers were just other questions, because no matter which way he answered, if he would have answered, somebody was not going to be happy.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought about when, I was talking about that lady that started that congregation.
Right.
Now, she's come under a lot of attack, and even people, if someone goes there and preaches or whatever, they come under attack, because, like, why are you going to this church that has this, she never calls herself the pastor, but other people say that she's the pastor of that church,
Right.
which is fine, but that starts a controversy.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
especially in this. And to bring
So
it back
should
around
she
to
have just not done that? Should she have just not followed
Well,
God's...
exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is a big deal, because I counsel a lot of girls who believe that they're being called in a ministry, and what does that mean? And here's to bring back what you were talking about, Austin. I think the drive to automatically find our purpose, even in God's calling, to be vocational, can end up causing accidental controversy that didn't need to be there. For example, I feel called into ministry. Well, as a female, what does that look like, and which categories vocationally in America do those things? And so you have the whole, well, I think I'm being called to be a pastor. And it may not be that you're being called to be a pastor in a formal lead pastor sense, because you have to tease out a calling, and a calling has to be tested. It's not just that feeling that erupts in your stomach. It's a good part that it's there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to discourage that. It's that your calling needs to be tested, because you don't even know yet, and the people of God around you have an influence on how that goes, because you're to serve them anyway. So that's to bring up I think we accidentally have controversial topics, especially with women in ministry, because I take a third position on the egalitarian complementarian scenario I'm working on. It's going to be my book. It's a dissertation.
Okay.
I think I've solved the problem. We'll see. I know that's a big claim, right? You're like, what?
Right.
Yeah, but it's fun, because I like to teach women in ministry, because I know it's going to be a controversial topic no matter what's talked about. But yeah, the guiding of callings, I feel like it needs to be focused on a lot more in places like here with the Bible Belt, where we're very comfortable talking about the Lord and His leading and how that works. And in the case of like this woman, and obviously she should answer that call, and obviously that's a good thing, but how does that dole out, and exactly how do we navigate those things? I think we could do a lot more work in helping come alongside the people who are being called, in helping them isolate what that means.
Yeah.
I hope that's what I'd like to see more of that. I've got kids at church that are like, I feel called, and I'm like, stop. It's one of the most abused phrases. Like, what does that mean? Do you also, is it the same feeling that you feel called for how you pick your lunch?
Yeah.
Right.
That matters.
Where's the call coming from? Is this coming from
exactly.
you and it sounds like God, or is this really coming from God?
Right, and even if it's just from God, if there's no confirmation by the people of God that are also hearing from the shepherd, that is what's happening, you're not testing the call. That's disobedience ultimately. Anyway, I feel like we could have a lot more guidance for our young people in that regard, to say no, vocational doesn't necessarily mean what God is doing.
Yeah. Well, even at that, if it's trying to determine whether it's a call from you, a call from God, and if that all reenacts, I think that we've really, as the body in general, have really underutilized women in ministry all across the board in general. Whether or not you believe they need to be in a pastoralship or what have you, it's always, okay, well, you're a Sunday school teacher and a treasurer. That's as far as we're going to let you go.
Your giftings are either hospitality or the nursery.
Yeah. That being said, I'm not gifted in the nursery, so please somebody step in for that.
I understand.
But that's really something that we've seen. And so with this church, the word had gotten out, and as vague as we can be to protect everybody. It was said, so you'll just preach at any congregation. So you got one pastor, you're going to preach there. Sure. Well, you going to preach at a gay church next? They need Jesus as much as the next person.
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea. But that was unfamiliar to me, I guess, because I'm still relatively new in the faith. I've not experienced as much. I've not been around and seen all this stuff. So that absolutely blew my mind that was what was brought up.
Didn't surprise me in the least.
I couldn't wrap my mind around how is this a problem? Yeah. This is a body of people that want to hear about God, want to be in His presence. I want to be a part of that.
You're going to share the gospel, and they say no.
Yeah.
Where do we find that? Where does sharing the gospel have a line?
Right. Yeah. Well, and the idea that to go and preach to a group of people means automatically that there's some implicit that you accept every single behavior that they're
exactly.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because Jesus didn't even do that. Right. And He hung out with us.
Yes.
Right? And it's the church people that He came to and was like, y'all are hypocrites.
Yeah. That's why they called him a wine bibber and
yes.
a drunkard and
yeah.
I think people always get out of the mindset of, there's plenty of things that I disagree with even with Philip, but we're still friends. We still have this together. We still have this, and that doesn't mean that I approve of everything. He doesn't approve of everything of me.
Right.
We can still have this reasonable discussion, and then let alone talking about God. There's going to be a lot of things that I disagree with in this and that, but we can agree on Christ, or I want you to agree with me on Christ, so let's talk about that.
Yes.
And it blows my mind. We also need to discuss what we had happen a few weeks ago with Anna, because I think she would really enjoy that, the conversation that we had.
Go ahead. I'm just going to agree.
So a few podcasts ago, we had one that kind of blew up, and this is a little bit off topic, but it is very much in your wheelhouse.
Okay.
We had one episode, for whatever reason, it blew up, and we got more responses than we have ever gotten.
Okay.
And so the first thing popped off, and it said, "Don't you know that you are the descendants of Esau, and God hates Esau, so God hates you?" And we were like, "What?" I wanted to be like, I don't know who my biological grandfather is, let alone if I'm a descendant of Esau. And what it boiled down to, we had probably a 30, 45-minute conversation back and forth through messaging with this gentleman, and he was a Black Hebrew Israelite.
I was going to guess. I was like, that sounds that's the first cult group I ever taught on at UT.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, that's one thing that we do share in common is I don't love cults, but I love to study about cults and to get the psychology and the mindset behind that. And I have a very dear friend that is an elder Jehovah's Witness. And he was very quick. He was the first person, I guess, I've had a sparring match with, so to speak, because you throw something out, counter, here's something else.
Oh, absolutely.
And he was phenomenal
Yes. That's some of the best training you can do.
The most amazing part to me was he didn't just use his Bible. He would take mine. He'd flip me. He'd be like, well, what about this? I'm like, what about this? And it was back and forth. But that was one thing I was like, okay, if Philip said, this woman, she talks about cults and she does this over here in Maryland, we need to come listen to her. And I was like, oh, I'm in. I'm absolutely in. But so what is the mindset of dealing with people that just, no matter what you come out with, whether it's because you're a woman or Black Hebrew Israelite, or how do we as the gentry body of Christ handle these discussions in a way that's effective?
So with people who are very obviously only there to be combative, they're there to just drop off a message, they're not interested in a conversation. In this day and age, something I found really effective, especially if it's American, there is an aversion to it being suggested that you're not open-minded. That you're completely shut off, you've completely made up your mind, and that you're just going to go off and do your own thing. There's this weird emotional aversion in our culture to being labeled that person. I don't know if you've noticed that. So I'll say something like, are you here to try to persuade me of your position, or are you just here to just drop off information and leave? And normally when they're put into that, all of a sudden it's exposed that they're being outrageously impolite. Which is a huge sin in our culture as well.
Yeah.
So they're being impolite. They are not interested in promoting themselves as wise or somebody who actually is informed because of their conduct. It's self-evident in our culture that that's not how this works. And so once you put them on the spot in that way, like, just tell me exactly what you need, I'm here to serve you. If it's just to drop off information and leave, then you feel free and we'll discuss it after you go. That sort of thing. And so you just kind of show them the respect as the individual, but you call out their individual character as a human being that's not just a stranger combatant. And I found that's extremely effective, because it usually is like, no, I'm here to have a conversation, and they'll still be kind of like, but at least you're having a conversation, and not just like a 1-2 punch with your messaging over Facebook or whatever it is.
It was probably one of the funniest conversations I had been a part of, because every time they would address something, a lot of it was, you need to read your Bible and find out God hates you. And Philip said, well, why would we read that? Why would we want to read that if that's all we're going to find out from that point?
If there is no chance, if we are out, why would I ever read the Bible?
What allure does that have?
Why wouldn't you just look at him and say, I identify as black and Hebrew? And just like, why is that a problem? Just wipe out the precursor. And
That'll be for the next one then. The one that really got me is he said, white Jesus isn't coming to save you. And I said, awesome. I don't care what he looks like. So I'm glad he's coming for us.
I agree with you. I don't think he's white either.
So in your classes, what does a classroom setting look like for you? Like, how does a lesson go out as far as with these college students now?
Yes. So we meet at the Campus House of Prayer, which is another interdenominational ministry that we've partnered with on campus. Fantastic ministry. It's a 2-story house, and the basements are all prayer rooms and gathering spaces, so you can isolate if you need a quiet spot. It's open 24/7, so we all have a code to get into the prayer rooms if you just need to pray, no matter what's going on. And it's fantastic because you have multiple religions coming in to use the prayer rooms, which then turns into literally the most perfect evangelism opportunities to not only figure out what you don't know about your own faith, but also to practice what you've learned at Russia Christi. Fantastic ministry. So we're there, and a normal night we'll set up lots of chairs. We can have, if everybody shows up, we have probably 35-36 students. There'll be people sitting on the staircase because we don't have quite enough chairs on the floor. And I always have a topic prepared, and it's a topic that they've specifically asked for. So at the beginning of the semester, the initial meeting is, who are we, what are we doing, and then give us what you need. And it's entirely student run in that regard, is that they determine everything we talk about. With the exception of one night per semester, I get to decide what I think they need. And we'll have integration nights with the professors, but there's normally a setup. I have my laptop, I have slides prepared, and I usually have material for them if they need it. I bring whatever books are pertinent, so I'll have a whole stack of books so that they can see, take pictures, borrow whatever they need. And we have students who are across the board as far as faiths are concerned. We have several atheists, lots of agnostics, lots of deconstructed kids, a bunch of Assemblies of God. We have a whole Chi Alpha is a really big ministry on our campus, and they've decided to come send their leadership to get trained in apologetics to go back to Chi Alpha. It's fantastic, and we're honored that they did that. And so I will talk for no longer than 40 minutes. Normally that's my normal MO. This year, man, these kids they do not stop. I have not done teaching until 1 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Period. And our meeting started at 8. They will just sit there like, yeah, okay, let's move on. What's the next topic? I'm like, you guys, like, I've spoken for 3, I will lose my voice because I'm talking for 3 hours, and it's dynamic. That's not just a lecture. I don't want it to turn into a class. But it's very informative. I'm teaching them how to evangelize. I'm teaching them how to persuade. I have my hobby and my background is, of course, the psychology aspect. So I'm always teaching them the psychology behind evangelism and how to talk to people and how to make sure you're serving the person in front of you in the moment, because that really, apologetics is evangelism. We're not supposed to separate the two. So if you're not evangelizing and you're only ever studying apologetics, you're actually being disobedient. But getting them through their nerves, getting them through understanding different personalities.
That's a point I'd like for you to expand on.
Sure.
So, apologetics and evangelism sometimes seem to be two different lines, and people think of those as two different lines. And like I've said before, some people think that an apologist has never led anyone to Christ.
Right.
So, just for a moment, just expand on apologetics and evangelism and bringing people to Christ all in that
Yes.
bubble.
Informed evangelism. So Ratio Christi, our emblem, if you've seen it, those two boxes, and the boxes interconnect, and it's in that center interconnection that RC is. That's in order to do evangelism apologetics for that exact reason, because in the modern Western understanding of evangelism, there tends to be this belief that you're either only doing the defending, answering objections, and that's it. And then evangelism is going out with your Bible and never doing any apologetics. You're kind of just like throwing the gospel at people, and then the Holy Spirit does the rest, but you're not responsible for, like what Paul brings up in 2 Corinthians, actively tearing down strongholds of the mind and attempting to persuade people, and doing so in it doesn't have to be this formal, but an Areopagus type of scenario where you are setting yourself up to be vulnerable in a group of people that disagree with you for their sake, and answering their objections, because belief in Christ and belief in the gospel is rational too. It doesn't have to be only rational, but it is rational. And in a culture that we're always, the church is always responding to the greater culture. Our current culture is very hungry for this material, and it's very heady, and it's high up there, and you're seeing the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Sam Harris, who's another psychology, these guys, and they have podcasts, and it's all very, this is reason, and this is pure reason. It's not pure reason. They're some of the most emotive human beings, and their arguments are not pure reason. But you don't necessarily know that if you've never studied logic. So it's not that apologetics is needed. It's that apologetics is a methodology by which the Lord has given us a gift to talk to people, which is why it's in the pastoral epistles so emphatically that you need to be able to give a defense for the hope that's in you, because it's defendable. Hence why evangelism has apologetics aspect, and I say that in a light way. It's not that you have to browbeat people with a proof for God's existence when you go out evangelizing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you are evangelizing effectively, you are always in service to the person who's in front of you and whatever they need in order to see Christ. And if what they need is more reasons and they're raising objections, then what you ought to provide to them is what they need. And I don't know how to get around apologetics. I have never once evangelized and didn't use apologetics, and not because I was just volunteering information to them. You wait, and it's not necessarily proofs for God's existence, but it's definitely like the biggest one. How do you know this book is reliable? If you're not prepared to talk about why the Bible is reliable, I don't know how you get through a conversation that isn't just, here's what I believe, kind of like throwing it at them, and then being like, accept or reject it. You know?
we want to jump very quickly to using the Bible to prove the Bible, and that's not going to work for somebody that doesn't believe in the divinity of the written word.
Right.
And so how do you feel about the apocryphal books as far as...
So I come from a background that it doesn't use the Apocrypha, but it wasn't against it either. So I come from a Lutheran background. The apocryphal books are not authoritative in the sense that they don't have the inerrancy criteria that the Word of the Lord has. That doesn't mean they aren't useful. So you don't have to fear them in any regard. And Maccabees is fascinating, and you learn a lot about what happens between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament, and it's very valuable, and it's so valuable that it was part of the Septuagint, which is what the Lord himself is referencing when he references Isaiah in Greek, for example. Anyway, so you don't have to be afraid of these things. You just need to understand the categories.
And so that's one thing I really appreciate about you and the way that you teach, is that you're not opposed to say, it's not this, it's not the written word of God. We don't need to spend time on that. That's evil, because you do study philosophy. You do have this mindset, and it's very. I never thought of it, but Paul was a bit of an apologist, and for him to, you can see depending on which group he's talking to, that's kind of the language he uses. So when he's on Mars Hill and he's talking to the philosophers of philosophers, he's up here, and he knows he's up here because he has to be, because that's the only way they can respond.
And he quotes their chief philosopher in the script, recorded in the scriptures, in order to make a point.
I think that's awesome.
It's fantastic.
I've never considered that.
Like you were saying, he give them what they need.
He spoke in the language that they need, which is the whole point of apologetics and evangelism. Ultimately, that's what it's supposed to be. Now, that doesn't mean human sin doesn't completely mar and as soon as you involve human beings, there's going to be a terrible error. But that doesn't mean the study, especially when the Lord is calling for us to have apologetics in mind, not necessarily in a formal sense, but to have that defense ready. If you don't, it's disobedience.
Yes.
It really is. And to put a label on apologetics, on something that the word actually calls for as good, right? And to turn it into something evil, I think it's shooting yourself in the foot. And then how do you not do that with other scriptures? And then when somebody points out, well, you're doing it with these scriptures, why won't you do it with other scriptures? It's like, well, there you go. Now you're a hypocrite. Get out of that one.
Well, you're just falling into the American church.
Exactly.
Picking and choosing.
Exactly.
I think it's downplaying and taking away from a very critical tool that you can use. I mean, it's if you imagine like a work belt,
Yeah.
You have all these different things. Apologetics has to be in there to be used, because you're going to find, especially with a lot of the theists and agnostics, they're going to come up with these rebuttals. They're going to come up with things of explain this. How does this happen? Why is this here? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you?
There are 34,000 different denominations. Like, okay.
Yeah. Well, we didn't pick that.
Not really. Well, not really, but also it's a moot objection. But you'll hear that they grant. Well, if you guys can't figure it out, then why should we be expected to figure it out? Well, hold up. It's denominations. We have liberty in Christ. Mm-hmm. Notice I didn't say different religions. Mm-hmm. So no, there are shared attributes across all of those denominations. Let's talk about that one. For example, Jesus. And then boom, you're right back to the Messiah. Yeah. But if you don't know to do that, mm-hmm. you can get caught up in rabbit trails forever.
Absolutely. So how do the students that are in these meetings that aren't believers, mm-hmm. how do they generally respond, and how do you feel their attitude works with this? Because I feel like on the immediate, my thought is they're going to be very negative, they're going to be critical, they're going to be very, well, kind of full of themselves in a way.
Very much so. Yeah, philosophy, first year philosophy students, when they've just become like just baby enlightened, and they're like, and now they're ready to teach, right? They're college professors because of that one moment. Like it's real. That could be really frustrating, but the positive is that we have a framework, a Western framework of logic and these presuppositions that we bring to the table no matter what, and you really can't get away from the Judeo-Christian mindset, mm-hmm. whether you intellectually reject it or not. You can't get away from the morality that we've taught for centuries and centuries. It's part of it. In fact, people like Jordan Peterson will point out that it's actually part of your biology now. So what's good about that, and understanding that as a teacher, is that you always have things that you can appeal to, that they'll respond to, mm-hmm. that feel self-evident to them in ways that they've never really investigated why that's self-evident. Mm-hmm. And so you can be the person to point out those things, and then have that moment of, well, how have you investigated why that's present? And then all of a sudden, now you're equals, right, with that arrogance. Mm-hmm. So that can help a lot. And then you almost can never get away from Christianity in a familial way with these mm-hmm. guys, and they're really just testing the waters for the most part. Mm-hmm. They're in college. That's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to look back through all of the things that you thought you knew and see if you really do know them. And sometimes they're just in rebellion because they think it sounds fun, and they're their own person for the first time. So you deal with that a lot. And then you get the angry guys, and these are guys that have had really, really horrible experiences in church. They've decided that experience is something that's across the board, mm-hmm. and that means they're required morally to reject Christianity. And it's those guys that are my babies. Those are the ones that I focus on the most, because that's genuine pain, and it's a whole different framework for evangelism. You're never going to be able to just throw the gospel at them and not have them completely reject it.
Yeah.
So different framework, but that's normally what we're dealing with, is something in that category. And so if we can keep it heady, or if you can come up with something that, like the crazy cult stuff that I like, pick up something particularly crazy and be like, did you see this?
Yeah.
Aren't they nuts? And you can even pick something like the Remnant Church in Nashville. You know about that, with the female leader? It's a personality cult. I think HBO. A bunch of people just died. They just flew a plane into the lake. It's Remnant Church. It's in Nashville. It's our closest cult. It's a personality cult. The woman has hair that's like all the way up here.
Like Brad Frankenstein.
Oh my goodness! And it gets bigger and bigger every year. So you can track the cult that way. I'm joking, but no, yeah. I think it's called Remnant. HBO is doing a documentary.
I've not heard of that one. I love the thought of having a map of like, oh, here's the closest cult to you.
Well, that's because that comes up because this is like, it's in, I forget what the really expensive part of Nashville is. It starts with a B, I think. There's a really expensive part of Nashville. Some of y'all know on the podcast. But it's there, and it's Remnant Church, and it's a church that does, it has made dieting its primary form of the gospel. So if you're not stick thin, have some type of eating disorder, you are not an authentic Christian.
Well, I have an eating disorder.
That's unfortunate.
Yes. So you bring up something like that. That is a group that's presenting as we're Christians. They are obviously not teaching the gospel at all, and you can very easily point that out. But you point it out to them because you've got a group of people that are local, that are claiming to be Christians and behaving like hypocrites. And you go, isn't this horrible? Can you believe that this has nothing to do with the gospel? And normally what will happen is they'll go, it doesn't?
Yeah.
Then what are you doing? You're talking about the gospel.
Yeah.
All you did was come in and call out exactly what they're putting their finger on, which is right. The hypocrisy of a group of people claiming to be Christians and not acting like it. Mm-hmm. Saying, that's dead on. You're exactly right. Now let's talk about what they're getting wrong.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
You're talking about Christ again.
That's the whole point. You always want to bring it, you're always bringing it back around to Jesus. You're always bringing it back around to the actual message. Because he's not going to mess it up. You will, but he was not going to mess it up.
That's a very valid point. We absolutely will mess it up. We do that pretty well.
Yeah.
The point of Christ being the center of everything, to me, is when, I try to take all of my things aside, all my presumptions, everything. But if you can see their life, their speech, everything is Christ focused, it's very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the people that I'm attracted to, and those are the people that I draw toward, and that is that familiarity that we have with one another as Christians, and that's what draws, I think. And because you have all these people that use that word Christian or use the Bible or whatever, but if they're not, it's just like, when you read the scripture from Genesis to Revelation, it's pointing to Christ, front to middle, or to the gospel, and from the revelation of who it is that we really serve, the revelation of Jesus Christ. The first sentence in the book of Revelation tells you what that book's all about.
Right.
This is revealing who it is that it is you serve.
Right.
This is who Christ really is.
Right.
What he's capable of. And if you can't handle this, you're serving the wrong person, because this is really who Christ really is. He's not a babe in a manger anymore. He's, this is Christ. And so all of that points back to the gospel. All of the Old Testament is always pointing to the gospel. Right. And if you as a child of God are not pointing your life, your speech, everything to the gospel, then we're off track, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to do so in a way that there's a curiosity. I think that at least I see it on a regular basis, but I am in kind of a bubble with the university stuff. But for the kids that are like rejecting Christianity for whatever reason, there's a curiosity that occurs when they just like are throwing a dagger, right? Just to be as mean as possible. And the fact that the person in front of them is not going, I'm so offended, I can't speak to you. Like that, it causes, they're like, why are you acting this way? It's like, no, actually, that's a good point. It's a little off. That's technically circular reasoning, but you've got a good point. And then they're like, what? We're allowed to have this conversation? Yeah, we're allowed to have this conversation, and it's fine. And nobody's gonna reject you or kick you out or call you a demon.
Yeah.
That can be a really, really powerful moment, I think.
Well, I think we've gotten too far as an American church in this steeped, almost pharisaical tradition, and if anything gets out of that, well, it's blasphemy, it's heresy. We can't participate, we can't talk, and that limits conversations we can have. That limits the way we can talk to people. One of the big things that I find a lot, and I don't know if you do or not, but the people that I work with, I do work a construction style job, and so there's a certain personality that comes with that. And there's a few people, once they find out that I'm a pastor of a church, well, anytime they're around me, if they slip up and they curse or they say
apologize,
they'll stiffen up real quick. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, listen, I'm a person. I've said things, I hear things, they're words. It's fine, we want that. And that's a good way to kind of break the ice, to be able to have a conversation. Yeah. So one of the biggest ones recently is one of the new guys at work. He was talking to his wife, and he said, well, Jesus Christ this, and he said something. He said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I said, dude, I say Jesus Christ every day. I said probably in a different tone connotation.
Right.
I said, but that's a great name to talk about. And so we were able to open that conversation. And I see a lot of people, especially elders in churches in this area, to where they're afraid to have those conversations, or they won't let themselves.
Right.
And there's a huge swath of people that you need to meet me halfway and have some commonality so we can have a conversation like that. And so in the college setting, how often are you seeing people that, I guess, are you seeing people that are coming that are in a church that are starting to have kind of the fall away? Because we always hear about kids that are that are perfectly in line with Christ, and they get into college and something snaps and they're gone.
Yep.
So are you seeing a lot of that?
A lot, yeah.
Kind of how is your direction towards them whenever you're talking to them?
Yeah, I could say with almost every case, it's either a kid who's been raised in the church, who is asking questions, and it's unnerving them because they can't figure out the answer, and the people that do have the answers are not Christians, as far as they can tell, and so they're falling away in a real scary sense, like, and they're unraveling as a human being, and then you have the other ones who are they've been in line with Christ the whole time. They get to college, they listen to their professor, and they're like, that's a crock, but I can't tell you why. So I'm gonna go talk to Anna, and she'll be able to tell me, so I can take on this professor in class. So it's one of those two normally, because apologetics it's a lot of thinking, and you have to not be afraid to do that. And you have to desire to do that. And high level thinking is painful, truly, and it's not. I say this kindly. It's not high philosophy stuff is not for everybody, and that's okay. You don't have to desire the high philosophy stuff to do apologetics. Like, it's not one or the other. There are lots of different ways to handle this. So it's that kind of thing, and then they join this community of people who are just I don't know if you've been, of course you've been bitten by the apologetics bug, but like once you get there, you're just like, this is great, because all you're ever talking about is God. And you're learning different ways to navigate things, and it emboldens you, and you realize that talking to people is not that big of a deal. And it really does. It's a liberating moment for the person who's like, I never felt like I was ready to talk to people about my faith, and all of a sudden you are, and you realize that conversation with your roommate that's really been needing to happen, and you've been feeling the prompting of the Spirit this whole time, but you've been scared. And so because you're chicken, you don't do it. And you always do the whole, like, I mean, I did it too. They're like, I'm just not ready. What if they ask me something I can't answer? Like, you can say to them, I don't know the answer to that question.
We
and
hear
keep
that
going.
an awful lot.
Yes.
What if I don't know what to say? Well, tell them you'll get back to me.
Say, I don't know what to say. Yeah. It's okay. You can just tell the truth in the moment. It's okay that you don't have it all put together. Of course you don't. So, I don't know. But yes, it's one of those two categories to answer your question.
So how do we as the church get to a point to where we're not afraid to ask and answer those questions? Because, again, I didn't grow up in a church. We were kind of we'd go to every other Christmas kind of service thing, and so I had a lot of questions that I went and found worldly answers for. And when I was a senior in high school, anybody that remembers me would tell you, I was diehard communist. I was going with this. I was all over this place with all these different theories, but then I would just like prop up Jesus kind of over here, so that way I fit in with this group too. And then once I actually did find Christ, it was like, everything that I've learned had just this little flavor of truth, but was cast aside over here. So how do we as a church prevent these things? How do we do better about being open and reasonable and answering these questions that have been deemed, forbidden?
Yes, as far as I can tell, and I think the folks who claim that they've been called by the Lord to be leaders in the church, I think we have a massive responsibility, and the Lord warns very often that the ones that are misleading his young people, and people in general, his children in general, it's better for them that when they meet him, that you have a millstone thrown on your neck and you have a quick drowning is way better than what it's going to be for you. And I think we need to really take that seriously in all of its iterations, and sometimes I feel like we only ever focus on the don't mislead, as opposed to what is the culture doing and how is our presence in the culture supposed to be responsive. I just don't, and perhaps because some people might say that because of the bubble, I'm going to be like, apologetics all the time. I can't get away from it even when I'm outside of the bubble. So I don't know how everybody else handles it, because I just can't get away from it at all. I think we need to step up and volunteer normal objections that we see all the time in front of our people while they're in church, full disclosure, full transparency, and do the work to learn how to answer those questions. It doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
And it's not high-level material because our culture doesn't think that deeply. They really don't.
We're not the high-level Mars Hill kind of thing of people anymore.
To me,
not even a little.
You know, we talk about Paul. We say, and I'm the one who brought this up to him, but I say that Paul didn't, not Saul, but Paul didn't really have faith because he had sight. He had seen. So he got taken and showed. And so faith is, you know, without sight. So Paul, in essence, people say, well, I wish I had the faith of Paul, but he didn't really have faith. He had sight. And so to me, when you study these things out, and I started to say earlier that what I've been searching out and learning and going to your community nights and those type things, I started to say that they have built my faith. But in reality, I think what's happening is what things I had faith in have turned into sight.
Yeah.
Because you can show me things that I had faith was there, but you actually show them to me.
Exactly.
And it no longer is faith anymore, it is sight.
Right.
And that's a different feeling.
Right. Because we're called to have faith in the Lord. We're not called to have faith in everything we encounter about religion.
Right.
But that's a big deal, and we need to understand that. It's in the same way that we're not apologists for everybody in the Bible, we're apologists for Christ. So there's something to be said about moving the faith realm well beyond what Scripture says it is, because now you might be doing damage, because you're adding to the text what's not there, and adding all these expectations. Because you're right, in my mind, and part of the reason why we do community nights is because I'm a firm believer in community building, and that the church is a local thing. That's not to say that there's anything bad about real big ministries or global ministries. I'm part of a global ministry right now, but I have this aversion to the celebrity pastor scenario. I just don't. I see it going real wrong real fast on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be that way, and the Lord protect the guys who are real big churches, but I just don't see it working that way scripturally very often. We shouldn't be pursuing celebrity is the point. And so if we're placed in a community, a specific community, those are the people to whom we have been called to serve, because you have that one-on-one ability. You have that ability to make those connections. So the reason community night happened was, in my mind, for tempering. Right, we're supposed to temper each other, the whole sharpening of Christians on behalf of the people that they are encountering that I'm not going to have access to. And to voluntarily step into that place and go, this is what the world is going to say to you. We already know. Full transparency, here are the answers. And if we don't have an answer, be like, we don't have an answer to this one. You know, it's just full transparency, so that they encountered it in the church by a believer. Before they go out to somebody who is totally fine with misleading them, doesn't care at all, doesn't think there are any objective morals, and that's the first place they're going to hear it from, that's terrifying. Yeah. Of course that's going to be unnerving.
Well, we've got to know the enemy before we can go out there. So
yes.
Would you argue that it would be fairly important to learn about what's coming out in the culture now, and to learn about these modern day philosophies? And so what is your argument against the people that would say, well, we don't need to learn about those things because that's going to draw the young people to those things? If they learn about this modern philosophy, you mentioned Jordan Peterson earlier.
Yeah.
There are a plethora of these internet philosophers now, which I love Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
I think.
And you've got Christian atheists, which is a whole nother phenomenon. Yes.
And so, we have these people, and some of them propose amazing ideas, and then some of them propose amazing sounding ideas. And so how do we say, well, I want to absorb, I want to know what I'm up against without falling into the snare of that?
Right. So the best I can tell is that it comes down to, do we really believe, as church leaders in particular, who we are focused on having to protect the sheep and all those things. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to distract from that. What I'm saying is that, is the Lord in charge or not? Is there salvation of your sheep, or potential goats that you don't know you're in your congregation maybe? Is there salvation in the Lord's hands, or is it not? Because if we become pragmatists and start behaving as though we understand what they're going to need for their intellectual protection, by denying what we've been called to do and here for their sake, we're incorporating our own understanding of pragmatism. We don't know how the Lord's going to work and what they're going to need. And we're also potentially being disobedient to our own calling in order to accomplish this. Nothing good is going to happen from that scenario. I don't know how to do otherwise. Maybe there will be a way to do it, and don't get me wrong, there might be a way. Somebody could come up with an example. But to fail to prepare the people who are going to leave your congregation with what they need when they leave, and you know they're going to leave, is just neglect. I don't know how else to phrase it. And that does not mean that the pastor is responsible for every tiny iteration of what's going out there. It means that the excuse of, I don't have to do any of that work at all because I'm doing something to protect them, I don't think that is protection. Do we not train our daughters to be able to try to fight back when they're attacked?
Right. It's kind of the idea of the bubble boy kind of child.
Yes.
If they don't have any exposure, then they don't have any defense to it. You weren't a bubble boy. You were walking barefoot through a creek whenever you were 5 years old.
But spiritually, I was a bubble boy.
Yeah. Well, and it's a well-meant thing. It's not. I don't mean to say that this is like a malicious, or even that it was an active decision on the parts of church leadership.
Sure.
The society has changed. We are to take care of our sheep. I don't see how we can't do otherwise, right? It'd be like, what's the blue material for farms? You take care of like chickens that get their legs cut, and chicken will go off and use the blue on their legs in order to keep them from pecking their own leg off.
I know what you're talking about, but I couldn't tell you.
It'd be like if I came up on a farm and they didn't have any of that material, and it's like, this is like the base first step to keep your livestock alive. Why don't you have this? Well, I've set up parameters to keep it so that they never have to be in that situation. It's like, that is naive.
Yeah.
How could you possibly think that you have that much control over this human being? I think it's wishful thinking, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's good intentions.
It's very well meant, because they're trying to protect what's the most precious to them. I have 2 kids. I feel the same way. How much exposure do I give them? I'm not sure I know the answer to that, but I do know exposure is necessary. So no exposure, I know, would be neglect.
Do you think that for the average household that it would be a better idea in today's times to homeschool children, or do you think public school? Because not everybody can afford a private school. A church private school kind of situation.
I don't know how to answer that question except to pray hard, because every kid's different, and those children have been entrusted to you by the Lord, and they're specific to you, and you're specific to them. There's a reason those kiddos were not given to me or to anybody else, which means you're going to have, as a parent, if you are really going to the Lord, you are going to have some intuitions about how to deal with that kid. Because I was a public school kid. I got trained a ton at home. Like I can't imagine that that's not called homeschooling, but I'm not from the realm of where homeschool is done, right? And here you all do. It's like basically private Christian school, as far as I could tell.
Hit or miss.
Yeah. No, I know. I realize it's out there. But then you have, I come from a land where the crazy public school stories could have potentially been something that goes on there now, right? So it's like, what is your child like? Somebody like me, you tell me something crazy, I'm gonna go research that. Like, I just am that person now. I always have been. My parents didn't have to worry about that. I have a friend, not that way. They would just, someone in authority, they would just take it and just act like it's gospel. So it depends. I don't think I can answer that wholeheartedly within like a formulaic way.
Sure.
Except to say that teaching your children is ultimately not a delegatable task.
Right.
So regardless of the options, you're still homeschooling your children technically.
Yeah, they are still your kids. They're not the school's kids.
Exactly. And you are responsible. You can't just... I had parents pass off their kids' theological education to me because they're going to a Christian... I'm paying for tuition at a Christian school, therefore my kid is safe. Those are the kids that walk away from the faith the fastest. Yep. I know if you give me your kid and they were all Christian all through, didn't do anything else outside of the Christian bubble, I will never see them again. If you walk them to Rush or Christie as a parent and say, this is where you're going to hang out, I will never see your child again. It's like the death knell.
Yeah. We have 2 little girls and a son on the way. They're about the same age as your kids. And we've kind of been in the mindset. We both went to public schools in Roane County, and we had some experiences in those
Okay.
public schools, and so my initial mindset is I do not want my daughters or son anywhere near that.
Okay.
But okay, so then we look at Christian private schools. We don't have the funding anywhere near that, and so we look at homeschool, and there's the big concern of, well, what about the people that don't have a wife that can stay at home to do that, or a husband that can stay at home to do that? What about those people, and kind of how we work on that? So I didn't know kind of that, but I guess it is just.
We're coming up on there. I get that question all the time. Because well, what's the apologist going to do?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know yet. We've been looking into co-ops. I've been looking into different curriculums. Because for a long time, my kiddos came with me to work. But we don't have the funds to not have both parents working. But I have that weird job where that's not I can still accomplish that goal. I think I could be biting off more than I can chew. I haven't done it yet. But the other problem is that I go to church with the public school teachers in our area, and all of my favorite ministry leaders all went to school in this school system and graduated from this high school public, and I know a bunch of teachers, and they're firm believers and I could never imagine that they would allow some of the stuff that I'm hearing on the news, for example. And so there's like this, maybe both.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it besides just take it one step at a time.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit on it really. That parents have to be directly involved in their children's lives in every aspect of it.
Yeah.
And so we do see a lot of lazy parents that'll say, okay, well, the school's got them, they can handle all this. No, you got to control the discipline. If you expect spiritual growth, you can't leave it up to the pastor. You've got to handle that as well.
Well, they do, yeah, right. They do that with church.
Yeah.
I go to church on Sundays. You're responsible for my theological education.
Yeah.
If you didn't provide it, it's not my fault. Oh, it absolutely is your fault.
Yeah. We try and reiterate, like, what we'll give you is a little bit.
Yeah.
You need to go do more. You need to be active. You need to have a relationship with Christ. Because I don't think you can have a relationship seeing somebody for 2-3 hours a week.
No.
That's not a relationship.
No.
That's an acquaintanceship, sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think that when you get to when you see Christ and he says, I never knew you. I think that's the people that are saying, okay, well, 2 hours is enough. That's not a relationship.
It's not, and you're not, when are you in the Word? The whole, you're at worship, corporate worship is for worship. There are other places that you have to go to have a relationship with the Lord that is completely outside of corporate worship.
Yeah.
So if that's all you're ever getting, you're starving to death. Constantly.
Yeah.
It's tragic.
We've been
very common.
Yeah. Very, very common. Oh, yeah.
That's the easy way out. Because there's the excuses. Well, I'm tired and
Are you still on excuses today?
I'm on excuses for a while. I get caught up, so I'll spend like a month on one topic, and I'll hit from every possible angle. And it's like, if you're not getting it by now, you just don't want to get it.
Yeah.
But we're lazy. We want to find an excuse to say, well, I don't really understand this, and well, the pastor will just take care of it Sunday, and that'll be it. Or I don't. Deuteronomy, I don't want to read through that. I don't want to learn that. That's not practical to me. And so then they just discount the entirety of it, and they don't want to participate. They don't. The most they'll get is they'll pop open their Bible app and they'll say, "Okay, here's my verse of the day. That's all I need to meet for God."
Yeah.
And we can see the spiritual decline that comes from that, sadly, quite a bit.
Well, it's hard too. I've noticed we've been browbeating hermeneutics at communion nights lately, and that's because I have people who are literally coming to me. They do not know how to read a Bible. The Bible literacy is just rampant. And
just
so
like a
they
novel,
do,
right?
Exactly. That's what they do. And so they'll open up the Bible and be like, "All right, well, I'll start wherever." They'll do like the Lord will open up, and then I'm in Exodus 25, which is ridiculous.
Sure.
And they're like, materials for the tabernacle, and it's just material after material after material after material. Why is this pertinent to me? And then they're bored, and they're like, "I can't do this," and they give up. And it's like, all of that was wrong. All of that was wrong. Hermeneutics.
Yeah.
There you go. There's your next topic.
There you go. Well, we've talked about before, everything in Scripture is there for a reason. It just may not be the reason for it right now.
Right.
So you may not need to know the dimensions of Noah's Ark. But one day you might.
Yeah.
And there's symbology behind it. There's all these things. And, the list of so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so, unless you're a Jew that's trying to trace back from David to Christ to see that's probably not going to affect you
or
very
you're
much.
dealing with a black Hebrew Israelite suddenly that you got introduced to, that you need to demonstrate that, like, I am not a descendant from Esau, and neither are you, or any of the other tribes. Like, so why are we talking about this like that? Yeah.
So, circling back to that, how often do you see, and of course you've got a lot more resource material for these cults and theologies than I do.
My little sister comes in here and she goes, "You have a problem."
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's good.
It's good.
I think it's good. How often do you see these cults that are popping up, or these different factions that are solely based on hate and negativity, and how can they formulate a reason? Because that's all we got from this gentleman.
Yeah.
You know, we would talk, and we told him, he said, this is the greatest Bible study we've ever had, because he'd throw something at us and we'd be like, well, let's read, let's get context, let's see if he's right, and then, well, you're forgetting this. Well, that's not, anyways. So when we see these things, how often how can a person justify, psychology wise or even theology wise, something that's based solely on the hate of another group or person?
Gosh, the only way I can think is that it's a response to something they've experienced, where they wanna give back, they want to throw back out the pain and suffering that they have experienced, or in the case of the Black Hebrew Israelites, we don't deal with very often, but when we deal with them, it's like Black Hebrew Israelites only for while they're traveling through Knoxville or whatever. Very, very rare, and they spit at girls, so you have to like be careful if you're taking women out to evangelize. I'm just throwing that out there in case your wives ever come with you. But so how do they do this? One of the things is that if they can explain whatever hardship they're dealing with, this is a psychology thing. If whatever hardships in life that they think are that they're dealing with, and that they could take one of two options with, I could take responsibility for my life and do something about it, or I can blame something else and say that I am not the source of why I'm experiencing the world in a way that is unsatisfying to me. And then you can turn that into an us versus them scenario. It's one of the most powerful forms of what's called bandwagoneering. It's what Hitler did in Germany. Very, very persuasive, because now you have an enemy. Other people are going to join you. You have community all of a sudden. You have a reason for being upset. It's potentially a good-ish reason, right? You think. And you have that extra, the increased sense of righteousness when comparison to people who are not going to be that way, and you have all of those things combined together. That's how you get mobs.
So it's kind of like a victimhood culture of a bunch of victims coming together, and
superiority. That's the word I was looking for. Is that the moral superiority? You see it with the political correctness kind of cultishness that's going on in our culture as well. That moral superiority that happens when somebody corrects you because you didn't say something quite right. It's that, and you see it, and they almost carry themselves differently when they do so. And it's that they get to feel for a minute that maybe I am getting something right in my life. And it feeds. It's very, very attractive.
What was that triangle that we studied the other day? And it was the victim, and then the press.
It was.
There's a triangle.
Okay.
And the victim transfers to the other corner,
aggressor.
The aggressor, and then it makes the person that was trying to help now the victim.
Yep.
And it's just this vicious triangle.
Yep.
I can't remember the
feedback
psychologist. Something similar. It was in the idea.
Person's name.
We're working with a small group in the local government to try and help some addicts that are coming out of rehab.
It's called a Line 9.
Okay.
And it's the idea of, if you are a recovered addict, whatever it is, you kind of get an addict that's come out of rehab, and you kind of introduce them to a new way of life. Because a big issue with people coming out of rehab is they go immediately back to where they were before. They fall back into the same downfall. And so since we have several recovered addicts within the congregation, we're kind of working on that. But it was what they were talking about, to where if you're trying to help somebody, be prepared for these things that are come back because of a victimhood mentality.
Right.
And very quickly they'll go from a victim to an oppressor, and then you'll be right there in the victim card, and then it'll just be back and forth, and you'll be kind of taking turns with that. So that's something we've kind of seen, and that does really affect the culture, because there's a lot of people, and this isn't political by any means, because it happens both sides of the aisle, whatever color or party wants to be, of these people are the bad people. put whoever you want to in there.
Yep.
Because they won't do this, and because they won't do this, or because they are this, well, that's causing us to have this downfall here.
Yes.
And you saw that in Nazi Germany, because it was, the reason that Germany's economy isn't booming was because of these Jews.
Right.
And these Jews, they're keeping us down, they're keeping us sick, this is where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very quick, very easy for that. And
Mm-hmm.
so we can take that and say, the unvaccinated are doing this. Well, then the vaccinated are doing this. And we fall into that mentality, and we are always being oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we always want to lash out. That was a horrible German accent, by the way.
It was fun to watch.
Yeah. You always got to throw a little bit of
do
humor in there.
something.
Yeah. And that's very dangerous climate that we're in. And we see, we try and we throw Christ in there, but then that creates another victimhood mentality, because people want to be victimized by the church, because then they don't have to follow it. And we talk about how the Christian walk is a walk of inconvenience. Jonathan said that. And you can't expect it to be easy. You can't expect it to be, you're going to get late night phone calls. You're going to get people that don't want help that you try and help. You're going to get people that are going to be aggressors to you. And so we really just kind of have to build up into that point. But that is something that is incredibly hard to say, because that doesn't make Christianity sound appealing.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Especially when you're saying, like, you mean that I could be a Christian and not happy? Like, well, yes, because the highest virtue isn't the pursuit of happiness. That's a kind of an Americanism. That's not a gospel.
And that's just the pursuit. That's not a guarantee of
happiness.
happiness.
That's right.
That just means you can try.
That's right.
I can't remember if it was John or who that said that he glories in the
sufferings.
The sufferings, because he suffers with Christ, for Christ, or with Christ, and he gloried in that he could suffer for or with Christ.
Let him share for a moment.
Yeah.
So how do we adopt the apostle mindset of this suffering's great? We're honored to suffer. How do we get that into our American idea?
Die to self.
Die to self, yes. Well, besides just taking your Bible and smacking yourself upside the head periodically, just to remind yourself that you like the suffering. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
You don't have to like the suffering, but I think the apostle mindset was the realization that all of the things that you could find more important than Christ are so, when you actually meet him, they are so far down the line of importance. It's not even funny. So and the liberating aspect of realizing that there's nothing that can stop the spread of his gospel by your mouth. I mean, like Paul was he was on cloud 9, because he could go and you can imprison him, you can beat him, none of it's gonna matter. I'm still gonna do exactly the same thing, and the people who just watched you beat me are gonna be like, wow, I also want that level of freedom, to actually be liberated from all of the stuff that just bogs us down, that's not even satisfying, and we know it. There's no cup of tea that will ever be as great as when you first met Jesus. I mean, when we think about that, that's hard to communicate to other people, but they'll see it in how you live.
Yeah.
But it's the liberating aspect, because it's like, the worst thing you could do to me is kill me, and in which case you'd be sending me to where I'd rather be anyway. So so it's like, it's the most liberating thing you could ever do, is to adopt an apostle's mindset. I don't know why we don't do it like everybody doesn't do.
I think there's a second half to Romans 8:18 that Paul forgot to write down, because Romans 8:18 is talking about the suffering and how the suffering doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's just a passing. Well, all the good things are also just passing, because there's something better that's coming after that. And so we get so caught up, and I think a lot of what holds us back, at least what holds me back, for to be completely honest, is I am comfortable here and I like this. And this is an opportunity out here, but I really don't want to go to that because I really like this here. And we have to get over that mindset of, while this is great, this is better, and this is down the road, and this is something that God has for us to get there. That's something that I've a lot of what I present is stuff that I'm internally working with, and it's like, maybe I'm just using you guys as a sounding board, but this is really hitting me today.
All those points that Paul forgot to write down, that's in the book of Deuterectomy. It's a lost book. Right.
Yeah.
When we find it, it'll be really helpful.
Yeah, it's in another Dead Sea Scroll.
Yeah,
they just haven't opened it up yet.
To read what Paul either was told or the letters that he got in prison to cause him to write the epistles.
Right, like the letter in between 1st and 2nd Corinthians and Corinthians A. that he's referencing. It's like, I want to read that one.
Yeah.
Especially when he's like, I was a little bit too harsh with y'all. I was like, oh man, what? No wonder it's not in there.
Yeah.
That's the reminder that he's a human being.
Well, he probably wrote it in an addendum like, hey, make sure you destroy that letter. We don't want this to be passed down. One day this will be canon, but that doesn't need to be canon.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the Lord does that work. No, I just, it really truly is, and I'm not just saying that to sound Christian, and I think some people think that, because we're so used to Christianese, right? There's a Christian way of responding that you expect. It's kind of like, yeah, I roll, like, what does that even mean? Mm-hmm. But it really is the most liberating moment ever, and it doesn't matter. You could get your leg cut off and nothing would change. And that, I think, is what the reference point is. That confirmation, not because you want a persecution complex or anything like that. Right. And I fear sometimes people go there too fast, like they didn't get their Starbucks exactly right that morning, and it's because Christians are being attacked. It's like, guys, this is why they make fun of us. Yeah. But, but to really pursue that, the genuine peace that comes from, there is nothing that could happen, absolutely nothing, that would change a thing. Yeah. It's wonderful.
When you first started talking and you were saying that when you had gotten on this path and you were helping your friends, that you made a statement. You said that, they could have killed me or whatever. I would not have stopped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From that point, I started thinking about that's an apostle mindset. Mm-hmm. I just didn't bring it up then. And then we've circled back all the way back around to that.
Hey, everything we do goes in circles, man. Yeah. So if you had one message, I guess, that you really had to get out there in some form, what would that be?
We live in a culture where our creature comforts are killing us. It is making us so completely... We're silent and don't even realize it. That's the level of suffocation that we're experiencing. Such that we have wonderful, beautiful Christians, truly, the people that have been in our congregations the longest, that you would go to for wisdom, you would hope to go to for wisdom, and they've never given the gospel themselves. They've talked about it, they've brought friends to church, but if you ask them to give you the gospel, the discomfort will erupt all over them, and that is tragic. It is completely, not just because of the practical aspect to it, but because that person has been in bondage for no reason. And I really hope I would, if I could light fires under butts, that's like how we talk about it on campus, I would take the really great, the men and women who feel like they're called to the ministry, and I would encourage them, step up and voluntarily place yourself in this uncomfortable position and say, I realize this is here. It is bondage that is it's a total lie. It makes no sense, and we can get rid of it right now. And just get rid of it. Tear it out of your congregations.
Awesome.
That's what I do.
Yeah. What are we looking at on time?
1:21.
Okay. So really quick, I wanted to throw this out there. This is going to be difficult, I imagine. A kind of a crash course thing. What are some of the biggest rebuttals, comebacks, contradictions that you're going to find in, like, let's say, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, some of these big groups that people are going to run into? Can you give us kind of a general look out for these things, and here's where to find that for some of the bigger cults, not these obscure five-party off in the mountains, but we're going to see Jehovah's Witnesses, we're going to see Mormons. So what are some of their things they present, and what are some ways that we can very quickly say, hold up?
Yes, and quick plug, on the YouTube channel, the Anna Kitko YouTube channel, we just partnered with a ministry called K-Paul Contact Mission. Okay. I don't know if you've heard about them. They're fantastic. All they do is apologetics, and they take apologists that exist, and they just translate them into like 15 different languages to get out to missionaries. I did see that.
Okay. I feel like it does sound familiar. We'll give you time to plug everything.
They just will, but this is your question. Yeah. They just asked me to do that exact thing in 10 minutes for the Jehovah's Witnesses, for the Mormons, and for the Hebrew Roots, which are the three biggest that you're going to encounter right now. I think those are mine. So they'll be up there. It's free. Go enjoy it. It's 10 minutes or less. Yeah. But the thing that you're going to see the most is they're going to attack Jesus. They're gonna change the Messiah. That's always what happens. It happens in every form. It doesn't matter that you know all the technical terms. What they'll do is they'll do one of two things. They'll either raise human beings up to the level of the Messiah, or they'll lower the Messiah down to the level of human beings. That's really all you need to know and be able to watch out for. So you want to focus on the person of Jesus. And then if you want to have fun and you like studying this stuff, then start picking apart their false prophet, whatever it is, Joseph Smith. I would say with the Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't have really false prophets except in the governing body form, but it's hard to find their specific material. So you're always looking at Watchtower material in general.
Well, they tend to change Watchtowers whenever prophecies don't.
And they burn the previous stuff, so you can't access it.
How very 1984.
How very convenient. Yes. So yeah, that's what you want to watch out for. Okay. And so know your Messiah. Right? What is he? Prophet, priest, king. Why does that matter? What are the things that he's fulfilling? What is the hypostatic union? That he's 100% man and 100% God. Why does that matter? Learn the complicated Latin if you like that sort of thing. How do the people of Trinity communicatio idiomatum? Yep. How do those properties communicate between the person of Jesus? All those things. Just get to know it, and not necessarily that you have to memorize exactly how to expound upon it, but that you have it in your brain such that when someone says to you something wrong, the red flag goes up.
Yeah.
Wait a second, that was off. Why did you say it that way? That kind of thing. Yeah. You know, that's how you identify when the Trinity is being pulled apart. I'm glad you
specified that. Why did you say it that way? Because that's one thing I've noticed is there's a very specific phrase or vernacular that is used to skirt around.
Yep.
So it sounds really good, but it's really missing this big point.
Yeah. And so you'll get that weird way of phrasing something. You're like, that's not how my pastor would talk about Jesus. You know, but you need to know, you need to have that in there in order for the red flag to go off. It's okay if you don't understand why it's going off. I just want you to have the flag.
Yeah.
Then you go home and be like, oh, because that's the whole point, is that you be able to identify so that you don't get preyed upon.
Yeah.
How many people do you come across that don't believe that Christ resurrected in the flesh?
So not as many anymore, unless they're the hyper-scientific types that's going to throw out Christianity in general. They're going to throw out historicity. They'll say ridiculous, which is truly ridiculous now, the claim that Jesus may or may not have lived. Like, not even like solid atheists will say that anymore. It used to be really in when the Jesus Seminar in the late 60s, early 70s. Now you're immediately considered like, that's ridiculous. Even the best atheist manuscript guys will say, yes, he lived. We just don't believe he was anything important. Right. So the physical resurrection, they'll say something along the lines of, and this is like the atheist, scientific, agnostic types, they'll say something like, something happened, it may have been manufactured by the disciples, and that it did, they hid the body, whatever, and then you can bring up the Nazareth inscription and demonstrate that we have more evidence for the physical resurrection than like anything in the history of mankind, and that's a big deal, and that's not an exaggeration. Like, we're talking actual historical evidence that something really did happen that looks like a physical resurrection, and this is on every level of analysis, psychologically, historically, philosophically, scientifically. I mean, the Nazareth inscription people don't talk about as often. I don't know why. It's incredible. Have you seen this?
No.
It's literally, it's a stone piece that they found in Jerusalem that is warning to the dates to the time of Jesus, that says anybody who is caught moving bodies out of tombs or disrupting the stones, the standing stones for the sepulchres, will be fined and possibly jailed. And they specifically go into, you also cannot move the bodies. Like, it's literally like, don't do this. This is why we're having riots.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
his resurrection created a new law.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that it's created many in the past. So that's I had something really good. Had a really good question for you. You got me sidetracked, but that is also valuable. Also,
you
good.
can come back. You're allowed.
Yeah.
This is RC headquarters.
It was Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay. So since that is your bread and butter, so to speak. Yeah. In talking with my friend in the past, he kept mentioning a date in the 1900s. And
1914.
Yes.
When Jesus came back invisibly.
He would never tell me what it was.
You're not supposed to know that yet.
It was always look it up.
Yeah.
And I could never find that. So what is that? What was he referring to, and what did I miss?
What you missed was that Jesus has already come back.
Okay.
And the reason why we all missed it is because it was invisibly. Okay. But he's already reigning. Since 1914 specifically.
This is a really weird reign then.
Because back then it wasn't that weird because World War One, right? This is the world is breaking down into the most like insane thing that the West has ever seen.
Sure.
So this looks like Armageddon, and all of their material that was developed at that time says specifically that anybody alive during that generation will not see death before Jesus comes back again, physically, to actually the apocalypse to like be ended, and the new heavens and the new earth to be remade. Because of course the Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that everybody goes to heaven. So the new heavens and new earth have to be remade so that you can also be remembered by Jehovah if you were a good Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
And then you can be cloned and put back on earth. Because you cease to exist. Did you know this?
I didn't.
There's a whole mind-body dualism problem there's a continuity issue there, because you cease to exist. You're completely unmade when you die. And if you're lucky and you were a Jehovah's Witness and you're not one of the 144,000, then he remembers you and remakes you.
Okay, so
there's no like immortal soul consciousness in between.
The explanation that I had been given was never that deep. It was simply, I don't think I'm part of the 144,000, so I'm not going to be in heaven, but I'll be on the new earth, and that's as far as it goes.
Right.
Yeah, probably because I would have been so skeptical if that had been before.
Well, there's material. They're literally taught not to introduce certain concepts until you're far enough in.
Okay.
So I'm giving you spoilers.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a cult now because
Yes.
I've got that inside information.
Oh, officially, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. They were. Did you know they were rounded up? They had their own armband in World War II.
Yes, I did know that.
Purple triangle.
Yeah, my friend was very because the Holocaust was his thing. He studied that. That was part of his, I guess, his elder speech.
It's a wonderful point in order for like the anatomy of persuasion that we're talking about on a regular basis. That's a wonderful point, is to be able to bring that up, because that's normally a point of pride, and it's a reasonable point to bring up.
Yeah.
And it's a way to get it. Like, I can't imagine. Like, do you know any of Jehovah's Witnesses? Do you go back several generations of witnesses, that sort of thing? Because it is normally familial. But yeah, that's what you were missing.
I'm shattered now. I'm going to have another conversation on a deeper level.
Yeah, because one of the things you can bring up is that Rutherford does say that this generation will not pass away, which means the World War I generation, I don't think there's anybody left. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
I'd have to find, there might be a couple people left, but that means that that's a false prophecy. And that's Rutherford. I mean, that's a big deal. He's the one that named the Jehovah's Witnesses the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, he cut everything down.
Yeah.
And he made that, I think he made that prediction. I want to say he made that prediction right there in the 20s, but it may have been as late as 1932. The point being, it's well past now.
Yeah.
And if they've never heard that before, you can pull up Rutherford's work that says it, because I've got it, and I'll give you photos.
Awesome.
And be like,
yeah.
Where is he?
I'd also like a Hebrew and Greek cheat sheet if we can get photocopies.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I saw that and I was like, oh man, that'd be cool.
That is, yeah.
This whole time I've just not been listening. I've just been looking around. No, it has been really good.
That's my OC over there. That's my the super packed corner one. That's my cult material.
Okay.
So that's all.
I do recognize that silver book sitting there.
Okay.
I've had a few of those.
Okay, the silver sword.
Yeah, I let Emmy, the oldest daughter, I let her just have a field day with it.
Yeah.
I said, this isn't going to do us any good. You can play with this book all you want
Okay,
to.
good for you. Good for you. Yeah, the New World Translation's a good one. Nathan Knorr, that's another good one to focus on. He's the one that did commission the New World Translation.
Yeah.
That's another way to skirt if you want to get around the stuff that's obviously been changed in the new NWT. They'll use a KJV, and I think you can get away with an NKJV as well.
Yeah.
Because that's what was allowed before.
Okay.
It's a good way to do Who is Jesus?
Yeah.
The ministry is to use that one.
He always told me that it was Michael.
Michael the Archangel, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
That's
I was always like, well, that implies he's created for this purpose, and that kind of takes away from the sacrifice aspect of it. And, yeah, but you got anything else?
No, I'm just familiar with the divinity up and down game that they play.
And that's
They're
really
either
all
bringing
it
your
is.
divinity up or his divinity down.
I would say that the Mormons would be very bring your divinity up based off what I know.
Yes.
Yeah. I've not had as much experience with them because I never had a buddy that was a Mormon, but definitely with the witnesses.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick one thing out of this incredible library, what would be the one book outside of Scripture itself that you would say, if you're interested in apologetics or if you're interested in whatever, what's your favorite book out of this group?
I would say if you're interested in apologetics and you want to get bitten, pick up Evidence That Demands a Verdict and start there, because you have the whole the score of material of which you can do a deep dive into should you wish it. And normally something will strike you as, I've always wanted to know that, and then that's your jumping point.
Okay.
Yeah, so pick up Evidence That Demands a Verdict. That's Josh and Sean McDowell.
Okay.
That's a fantastic way to start. For you, I would hand you my New World Translation Interlinear,
Okay.
which has the Greek and the English that's correct.
Okay.
So you can open up their own material and say, why does this say that Jesus is divine and the New World Translation doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
When this is your own interlinear. So that can be really powerful. Jump on eBay and pick up old material. That's just fun.
Yeah.
If you're into cult stuff. The Mormon stuff is really fun too, because I mean they are just.
I do have a Book of Mormon, and I guess it's not from what I was told, it's not the general run of the mill. This is your first copy. Mm-hmm. This is the next level copy. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, that's a little suspicious. Just reading that first heading about the witnesses and how that corroborates.
Yes, and I can show you a first edition Book of Mormon copy with all of the changes marked. There are 3,913 changes between 1820 and now, including referring to the conversion as getting further and further towards white skin. So, they refer to it as white and delightsome. Talk about false prophecy not aging well.
The first Ratio Christi Community I was able to attend, I believe one of your students, I think he was the black kid, he stood up and he said something about like, hey, Mormons, is this what they're really about? And you're like, oh no, this is absolutely what they're about. Ask them about it. Ask them about it. Yeah. So for real, because even if they've never heard it before, if they're a baby Mormon, they just never encountered this stuff, they have to go back to their elders to ask, and the elders will know. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And that's a whole, you're having apologetics conversations that are like 3-4 generations that you just kind of stuck a pebble in their shoe and they're like,
yeah,
have fun.
Yeah. Wow.
Joe said, I come in at the wrong time. I'm completely lost. Yeah,
Joe,
you started late in this. Yeah, you need to go back.
But if you're a philosophy kid, if you like philosophy, but you don't want it, you want your first introduction to philosophical thinking, you need Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy.
Okay.
It's not long. That is what was carried by ministers for the Lord during the Dark Ages. Okay, they would carry their scriptures, and they would carry Boethius because he was killed for his belief by Theodoric, which was the Visigoth king that first sacked Rome. So he was his lead. Boethius was his lead, secondhand guy for a long time that helped advise what's going on in the empire, and of course the Western Empire had been Christianized. And so this is what he wrote from prison. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful, very, very wonderful. So if you've never done philosophy, that's where you start.
Have you heard of the guy? I want to say it's in England, somewhere over there, but he was killed, martyred for his belief, and they put his head and hands on a gate and made everyone go through under his head and hands for the sign that this is what happens if you are open Christian in this country or this town or this area or whatever. But they did that to people. Was it
Wycliffe maybe? I'd have to look it up. I don't remember. I know the reference, but I don't remember who it was.
The weird thing was this minister had taken this group of people over there, and there was this, of course that wasn't there still, but this person, and then later on there was a church built under his name, and there was an inscription and stuff, but she had been given like a song or something, and anyway, there was an inscription there, and this lady was in this church, and she got to go in that area where his head and hands were, and found out that this was like her great grandfather or something, and then this church was named after her grandfather, and then this song that God had given her, part of the words of this song was instilled in they had it, something that he had wrote down like while they were martyring him or something. I love that. Yeah, but it was an awesome story.
Yes, if you're into that you're looking at the history of Fox's Book of Martyrs, if you haven't read that before, obviously I didn't know people on the podcast, it's incredible. If you want church history in a way that is processable, that's not boring, you need Bruce Shelley's Church History. It's about this big, and he goes all the way through, and that's significant, because church history is massive, but it's fun, and it doesn't matter what denomination you are. You get something that's just, this is what happened, basically. He's fantastic. I'm trying to think what else, depending upon what your podcasters need.
Well, we've got, everybody you can imagine, from no education to high education, everything in between. And of course, we've all got different preferences and stuff. So I'm very excited to do some research and do some reading.
Good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Have you got a copy of Plato's Republic and Marcus Aurelius's writings?
Yes.
I figured.
But they'd be out there. Republic's up there. If I have Marcus Aurelius, it's out there. I don't think I have him up there.
Yeah.
We'll see. That's my philosophy section.
I figured you couldn't go in there without going a little bit of Stoic.
I adore Stoicism from a practical standpoint. It's still wrong.
Thank you.
But from a practical standpoint, it's really lovely to have to begin with the assumption that you absolutely are in control of which emotion gets expressed when. Now they go too far and they go to like emotionless, which is not helpful.
Yeah.
But if you're somebody that that is highly emotive, it can be a wonderful discipline to study, that the fact that you absolutely can take a minute just because it erupts in you does not mean you have to express it.
Yeah.
But that's easy for me to say because I tend to the Stoic side of things. Yeah. Naturally, I prefer that.
Well, out of all the philosophies, everything that I've read, Stoicism's, to me, it seems like, man, I can get fully on board with this. Just throw Jesus in the parts where they leave him out,
right?
And then just control how you react to things.
Right.
Is the gist of the whole philosophy.
Right. But the only problem is you can never get vulnerable.
Yes.
And the person in front of you may need vulnerability, which is where Stoicism fails.
Yep.
Yep. It turns into like a place where you can hide if you're good at Stoicism.
Yeah. So tell people where they can reach you, where they can see your videos, because we know you've got a pretty extensive video catalog now too, between the Ratio Christi and your YouTube channel, of where they can find some of the answers to some of these questions, maybe, and how they can contact you or anything. Just plug yourself and anything we can do.
We have the Anna Kitko YouTube channel. I'm the only Anna Kitko out there so far. So Kitko and ANNA, you'll see it pop right up. You'll see my face. And we've got all of our previous community nights up, with the exception of this semester. Those ones are still in editing, but they'll be out soon. So that you can review, you can listen to the live Q&A. You can listen for our previous topics, so that you know what has already been covered and probably won't be covered in the next. I don't know if we're going to do slavery in the Bible in the spring, if we're going to do critical race theory, stuff like that, like the secular stuff that's coming out, whether or not we don't know yet. We haven't picked a topic, but it won't be anything that we've covered previously yet. We haven't come back around yet. So there's all those things, plus all of the added material if you want to learn about logic, if you want to learn about cult material, if you want to see some of the television shows we've done, anything with me in it, you'll see in that channel. But you can also just go to the Ratio Christi channel and get all of our apologists across the globe on their special, like their expertise. So you'll never see me tackle things like the age of the earth, because I can't stand that topic. I just don't like it. I'm disinterested. So if you're like, I need to know about dinosaurs, I am not your girl, but I know apologists who are, and they're on that channel, and they'll be like, yes, I will give you a breakdown of exactly what's going on, old earth versus young earth, whatever. So yeah, Ratio Christi in general, that channel. And then of course you can follow us on Facebook, Ratio Christi UT Knoxville. I'm a meme smith. I like to moonlight as a meme smith.
So my wife follows, and she'll show me memes all the time you put up there, and they are hilarious.
we believe very much.
I have no idea what she's talking
about. Well, they're pop culture centered.
They are pop culture,
because that's how you reach people.
Yeah. I believe very much in teaching through satire, because I think it'd be really fun, and it's in a good way, and to demonstrate that we have humor and can make fun of ourselves as well. So yeah, follow us on Facebook, and then of course I have got my own page as well. You can feel free, and you'll be kept up to date on all those things.
Awesome. We'll make sure we put links to anything that we can, and we'll try and put references to any of the books you had mentioned, so we can put all those in there.
And if you needed to email me directly, it's my name, Anna Kitko, at ratiochristi.org. RATIOCHRISTI.
There you go.
Yep.
So one final question: when it's not anything to do with theology or philosophy or psychology, what do you read for just pure entertainment?
Oh man, so I lately it's been all of the post-apocalyptic stuff, like Orwellian, going back through some of that material. I like really like dark and dismal Russian novels. Like I'm one of those people. So like and even in like real material that's like not fiction.
Yeah.
So I love like Dostoevsky. That's fiction, obviously, but like the Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago. I just finished that recently. So yeah, I guess I'm in like those veins lately.
Okay.
And then I do like fiction, so I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and I haven't gone back through the Lord of the Rings yet. It's been a while.
I've just started reading the Silmarillion.
Oh,
I'm struggling.
are you? We all struggle. It's okay.
It's the fact that there's 3 names for every single person, and they just interchangeably.
Yep.
Yeah.
I totally get that.
I need to get a cheat sheet down.
Oh, and they make them.
Yeah.
They make them.
Like, oh, so this is a Iluvatar. Okay.
So there's a running joke that you can sit there and anything you bring up with Lord of the Rings, if you can't remember, you just make something up and say it's in the Silmarillion. Like, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
But there's if you love stuff like that, there's called the Middle Earth Theological Seminary, and it's all Lord of the Rings nerds that are also Christians that love to make fun of, make memes. You just need to join that group.
I do, because Tolkien was a Christian and an absolute nerd, and therefore C.S. Lewis was as well. And this
Yes.
You don't put
Yes.
C.S. Lewis in. Now I'm interested.
Well, see, but you listen to you like C.S. Lewis strictly for his theological works. But I grew up and I read the Chronicles of Narnia in like middle school, and I was like, "This is awesome." Never thought of it as an allegory for Christ until you know Christ, and you're like, "Oh, how could you?
How could you miss this?" Yeah.
Yeah.
So, have you watched at least Lord of the Rings movies? No. Okay, I was gonna say Treebeard was literally modeled after C.S. Lewis. That was his little his ode to C.S. Lewis, the Inklings. Yeah.
I thought Faramir was.
There are a bunch of different analogies, but yeah, Treebeard was the joke.
Yeah.
Because of the
we're gonna have to have a Tolkien specific podcast episode.
So I did part of my thesis for seminary.
Yeah.
As my I just am interested. I did C.S. Lewis and Tolkien's an analysis of their friendship the way through. So yeah. Anytime.
Awesome. Yeah. We have our next episode whenever we can get it. Yeah.
We're trying to get John Lennox. That's the big. John Lennox studied under C.S. Lewis. Yep. But that'll hopefully be our next big event.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Folks, we do appreciate you joining us today. We hope that you got, at the very least, entertained, but we know you got some more on that. It's hard to leave a conversation that doesn't come with something new involved. So we appreciate you joining us. If you're watching this on video, you need to download the audio, because there was a little nugget of gold there at the beginning that was only on the audio because we didn't realize we were recording yet. So that's another good reason to do that. We appreciate any shares we can get. What sharing does is that helps us get into other people's world. So we're not just located to the people we know, but it's the people that you know now. And that's a good way to get this out here. Not for our benefit, not for Anna's benefit, but for Christ's benefit. Everything we do is to try and promote Christ as far and wide as we possibly can. But anytime that you leave a review, a comment, a share, that does help more people find us and see us and to be responsive to us. And we want to remind you that next episode is the 100th episode. Yeah, you're 99.
All right.
So next episode is our 100th episode. We're going to have a celebratory podcast episode, inviting back any and every guest that we can get. If you are available, we'd love to have you as well. We're going to be in the sanctuary. We're going to have the camera set up, and we're just going to have kind of a free form. What has these last 100 episodes been like? And we're going to talk to different people and hopefully have a real good time. So we'd appreciate you joining us for that. After that, we are looking to get a question and answer episode. So any questions you may have that you either have been too afraid to ask or you don't feel like you've gotten a satisfactory answer, write in. You can email us at blessingcursing3019. You can do it on Facebook. However we can get it. And if we don't know the answer, we know people that may know the answer.
Right. Yeah,
and if you don't know the answer, you know somebody that may know the answer.
Exactly.
And we would love to be able to just answer any question. Don't be embarrassed by it. Doesn't matter what level it is. If it's a question you have, it's a serious question, and we want to do our best to help you out with that. But we appreciate you joining us. We appreciate all that. We love you. God bless you, and thank you.